Well, hello, everyone. I have a great guest with this this evening, Dr. Jennifer Bauwens, and she is the director of the Center for Family Studies at the Family Research Council. She researches and advocates for policies that will best serve the health and well-being of families and communities. And Jennifer earned her Ph.D. from the New York University with an emphasis in trauma studies. Her scholarship and publications have focused on the effects of psychological trauma, including man-made and natural disasters. And tonight, she will be speaking on psychedelic assisted therapy, the science, the politics, and the potential harms. So welcome.
Good to be with you, Greg. I'm excited to share tonight, and we can go ahead and just dive right into it if you're
All right,
ready.
let's
Okay,
go.
so let me start sharing my screen here. All right. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start. So what I want to talk to you about tonight is psychedelic assisted therapy, and I won't go into a lot of what that means, other than it's been a treatment protocol that's been in the works for some time now. But basically, it's been billed as a treatment protocol that brings somebody into an altered state in order to deal with the traumatic experiences that they've had in their life. Now, right now, it's been billed as primarily a treatment for post-traumatic stress or traumatic experiences. It's getting a play in a wide range of issues, including anxiety, depression, etc. But the primary focus at this time is on PTSD. So, given that, I want to just talk a little bit about the background that gave rise to this as a treatment protocol, and also some of the science that's being used to get FDA approval for psychedelic drugs, and also what are the clinical concerns. As Greg mentioned, my background is as a trauma therapist and researcher, so I'm very concerned about how this is going to impact those who've had traumas in their life. Okay, so first of all, you just have to remember the background here of what's going on in our larger society, and that is just in the last 30 days, about 2.2 million Americans have reported using a hallucinogen, and that's outside the clinical context. Okay, and that's important to keep in mind, because once this treatment, once psychedelics or hallucinogens gets sort of endorsed by the FDA and by our government, then it's no holds bar, right? Because if it's good for the clinical context, then why wouldn't it be good for the rest of the world? Okay, so we're just hearing about the psychedelic assisted therapy, but there has actually been a long-standing effort to legitimize marijuana and psychedelic drugs through research. In fact, some of the key players of this movement actually said when the Nixon administration put both marijuana and psychedelic drugs and issued them as Schedule I drugs, meaning that they have no redeemable clinical value. Okay, so ever since then, there have been groups that have been working hard to bring a legitimate view of these types of drugs, and they said that they were going to do it through research, and that's exactly what we're seeing. So one of those characters that has been at play is Rick Doblin. And he wrote his dissertation, in fact, on how to get the FDA to approve both psychedelics and marijuana. And so as we all know, marijuana has already been released on our society. And now the next move is for psychedelics to likewise be released. And so how do you do that? Well, how do you decriminalize? And through legitimizing these drugs, you do it by saying that they have some medicinal or psychological benefits. So let me just tell you a few concerns that I have about the research that's being used to support FDA approval of psychedelic drugs, including MDMA, hallucinogens, other hallucinogens like LSD, psilocybin, etc. First of all, when you look at the data that's in clinicaltrials.org, a lot of what you'll see are the same researchers. And you already heard me mention one person's name, and that is Rick Doblin. And you'll see his name in his organization MAPS, which is it stands for psychedelic research. I mean, they've actually changed the name. So you'll see the same cast of characters doing the research. Now, what on earth could be wrong with that? You kind of lack a little objectivity when you have the same people doing the same work who all have a vested interest in producing a certain outcome. The other problem that you'll see in this data and these research studies is that many of them were produced with very small sample sizes, often less than 25. And that, not to get into the weeds of that, but when you're doing meaningful comparisons, samples of less than 25 just don't even give the right threshold for some kind of statistical comparison. And then interestingly, and then this is just one study, but I found it curious that in this particular study, 61% of respondents said that they experienced improvement on a placebo. So they were put in a kind of like a psychedelic condition where they're in a room, like with maybe lava lamps and so something that would indicate a psychedelic type of experience. And they ended that experience saying that they had a improvement in their symptoms. So that's very curious. The drop rates are also high in these studies. And here's a few other things that I just quickly mention is that there is obviously a clear agenda when you look at the fact that even before the FDA has approved these drugs, that there are certification programs available to you. So right now, as a licensed clinician, I could go out and get a certification in psychedelic assisted therapy. Now, what business person would go and produce a program or a service not having a clear understanding of whether or not that service was going to be approved by the government? I mean, it's maybe somebody with great faith, or could it be that they understand that approval is inevitable? And this is likewise, you'll see this marketing efforts already with the VA. The Veterans Administration has put out videos exclaiming how successful this treatment is. There are other academic and continuing education courses that are available. They're also already touting this treatment. And then interestingly enough, okay, for those of you who may not be in the clinical field, if you just go to HomeGoods, TJ Maxx, Netflix, Hulu, you'll see all kinds of homeware and programs that are all around psychedelics or pictures of mushrooms. So clearly there are forces behind the scenes that are really wanting these drugs to be viewed as acceptable by the wider public. And most importantly, these are the things that I have the most experience in, and are my concerns related to the trauma field. And that is that this intervention, let's just say, whether it's used in the clinical space or just in a decriminalized space, the concern I have with those undergoing this treatment is that it's for trauma, is that it actually mimics the part of trauma that's very painful, which is a sense of utter lack of control. And by going into an altered state, you are relinquishing control to another person, and that is the therapist. And that is a lot of power to give to somebody else. And we've actually already been through this process with what used to be called the false memory, that whole scandal that happened in the late 80s and perhaps early 90s. And that is where memories were planted in people who had a altered experience through hypnosis. And so in this sense, we're kind of repeating history where we're relinquishing control again to another person who has a lot of power over that client. And so in this way, there is a problem with informed consent, because once you already start the drug, you can't withdraw your consent. And the much of informed consent is about being able to take it back. So if you no longer want to participate, you can withdraw your consent, but you can't in this case because you are in the trip. And I would just share a few more other points regarding the latest study used for FDA approval. Now, this study did have a few more participants than the bulk of the studies available on clinicaltrials.org. But interestingly, 98% of participants had these what's called treatment emergent adverse events. So in other words, these are adverse experiences that come about by participating in a treatment protocol. So in this case, 98% had physiological negative responses. They had heart palpitations, nausea, so forth. But the one I'm most interested in is actually the psychological, because the goal of this treatment is to lower a person's psychological defenses, right? So at baseline, 23% of those research participants who started the psychedelic treatment already had a diagnosis of a dissociative type of PTSD. In other words, they're already have a level of disconnection that is at work in their life. And what this treatment is doing is facilitating more of that. So you see some of those adverse events are dissociation, flashbacks, grief reactions, strong grief reactions. And I'm not hearing guardrails for how to deal with this level of response. Because no clinician can really predict what's going to happen once a person starts the drug. Okay, and then what you see in this particular study, this FDA approval study, is that a lot of these folks already have experience with the drug. And almost half the population or half their sample already has used the drug in some ways. So they may have some preconceived notions about the effect the drug will have. The other issue is we know with trauma, a lot of folks already have comorbid issues. So they already have substance abuse problems. And then, we have a treatment protocol that is inviting them, well, in some cases, into the drug that they've already used. In other cases, we don't know what that might initiate by taking the drug. So I already mentioned, there just aren't a lot of guardrails on this, and this has a lot of potential to be dangerous for a number of people. And I think we really need to. We have treatments that are effective for treating trauma without putting somebody in this type of condition. So those are my points. Those are my main points for you to know about as you're engaging in this issue and the dangers about it.